Once upon a time, a king and queen ruled a distant kingdom where fairies still existed. The royal couple had everything they could want: wealth, fine clothes, delicious food and drink, and a grand carriage for daily rides. But there was one thing they lacked: children. They had been married for many years, and their hearts ached over their childlessness. One day, while the queen was walking beside the river at the edge of the royal gardens, she noticed a tiny fish that had jumped out of the water and was gasping for air on the bank. She felt sorry for the little creature and gently tossed it back into the river. Just before it swam off, the fish lifted its head above the water and said, "I know your deepest wish, and because you saved me, it shall come true. You will soon have a daughter." And sure enough, not long after, the queen gave birth to a baby girl, so stunningly beautiful that the king couldn't stop gazing at her in joy. To celebrate, he planned a huge feast and invited nobles, relatives, friends, and neighbors. The queen added, "We must invite the fairies too, so they'll bless our daughter with kindness and good fortune." There were 13 fairies in the kingdom, but the palace only had 12 golden plates for them to dine with. So, one fairy had to be left out. The 12 invited fairies arrived, each wearing a tall red hat, red shoes with high heels, and carrying long white wands. After the feast, they gathered around the baby princess and began offering her their gifts: goodness, beauty, wealth, charm, and all the finest qualities one could wish for. As the 11th fairy had just finished her blessing, a loud noise echoed from the courtyard. Word came that the 13th fairy had shown up, wearing a black hat, black shoes, and holding a broomstick. She stormed into the banquet hall, furious about being excluded, and scolded the king and queen. Then in her anger, she cast a curse. On her 15th birthday, the king's daughter will prick her finger on a spindle and die. Gasps filled the room. But the 12th fairy, who hadn't yet spoken, stepped forward. "I can't undo the curse," she said, "but I can soften it. She won't die. She'll fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. Still hoping to prevent any harm, the king ordered every spindle in the kingdom to be destroyed. Meanwhile, the other fairies' blessings came true. The princess grew up to be kind, wise, graceful, and loved by all who met her. Then, on her 15th birthday, while the king and queen were away, the princess wandered alone through the castle. She explored every room and hallway until she discovered a narrow staircase in an old tower. At the top, she found a small door with a golden key in the lock. She turned the key, opened the door, and saw an old woman spinning yarn. "Hello, good lady," said the princess. "What are you doing?" "I'm spinning," the woman replied, humming to herself while the wheel whirred. "That little thing turns so nicely," the princess said, reaching for the spindle to try it herself. But the moment she touched it, the curse came true. She pricked her finger and collapsed to the floor. She wasn't dead, though. She had simply fallen into a deep, enchanted sleep. When the king and queen returned and saw what had happened, they too fell asleep. Everyone in the palace slumbered. The guards, the servants, the horses in the stables, the dogs in the yard, even the pigeons on the rooftops. The fire stopped crackling, the roast stopped turning on the spit, and the cook, who had just raised her hand to scold the kitchen boy, fell asleep mid-motion. The butler, who had been sneaking a sip of ale, dozed off with the jug still at his lips. Everything came to a stop. Then, as the years passed, a thick hedge of thorns grew around the castle. It got taller and denser with each passing year, until the entire palace disappeared behind it, roof and chimneys and all. Yet the legend of the sleeping princess spread across the land. Many brave princes tried to make their way through the thorny barrier, hoping to reach her. But the thorns held them fast like hands, and they perished in the attempt. After many, many years, a prince came to the kingdom and heard the tale from an old man. The man spoke of the hidden palace and the beautiful princess who lay asleep inside. He told of the many princes who had tried and failed to reach her. But the young prince said, "I'm not afraid. I must see her for myself." The old man tried to warn him, but the prince was determined. As fate would have it, the 100 years had just ended that very day. As the prince approached the thorn hedge, it magically opened into a path of blooming flowers, letting him pass easily before closing again behind him. He walked into the silent courtyard, where the dogs slept and the horses stood still. The pigeons on the roof had their heads tucked under their wings. Inside the castle, flies rested on the walls. The roast on the spit had stopped turning, and the maid still sat with the chicken in her lap. Even the cook was frozen in the act of scolding the boy. The prince continued until he reached the tower and opened the door to the little room. There, lying on a couch by the window, was Briar Rose. She looked so peaceful and lovely that he couldn't help but lean down and kiss her. At once, her eyes fluttered open, and she smiled at him. They walked out together, hand in hand. Soon the king and queen woke up, along with everyone else in the castle. The horses neighed, the dogs barked, the pigeons flapped their wings and flew off. The flies buzzed, the fire blazed, the roast began to spin again. The butler finished his drink, the maid continued plucking the chicken, and the cook gave the boy his long overdue scolding. And so, the prince and the princess were married in a grand celebration, and they lived happily together for the rest of their days.